Tonight we slip softly into the sandstone hush of an Egyptian temple, the kind where pillars rise like forests and the moonlight glints off carved gods who seem to be watching you just a little too closely. The desert night is cool, but inside the temple the air is thick with incense, smoke curling like lazy cats themselves. And there they are, actual cats, lounging in doorways, weaving through the ankles of priests, and blinking at you with that smug little half-lid stare that somehow says, "Welcome, human servant." You probably won't survive this. By the way, temple life is rough, and cats, well, cats will never truly be under your control. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across polished stone, carrying a clay bowl filled with milk warmed under the fire. The cats already know what you've got. Half a dozen tails flick upward like banners, announcing your arrival. Ancient Egyptian temples were places of staggering grandeur, filled with statues of gods and rivers of worshippers, but here, in the moonlit quiet, the real guardians are these furry little companions. You crouch down, the smell of warmed milk mingling with frankincense, and watch as they lap at the offering, their purring blending with the faint chant of priests in a nearby chamber. It's not just a sleepy aesthetic. Historically, cats were deeply woven into temple life, both practically and spiritually. They controlled pests that threatened grain stores, and they also embodied the goddess Bastet, the lion-headed or cat-headed deity of joy, protection, and music. That meant you weren't just some glorified zookeeper, you were part caretaker, part priestly assistant, and part, well, cat butler. Which, let's be honest, is a role humans still haven't escaped in the modern day. Your sandals scrape softly on the floor as you follow the path of flickering oil lamps. Above you, the ceiling is painted with stars, but your eyes keep drifting to the shadows where pairs of glowing eyes peer back. A temple at night can feel eerie, the colossal statues, the whispering halls, the echo of a single dropped pebble. But with cats around, there's always movement, soft paws against stone, the occasional startled hiss, or the unmistakable sound of a jar tipping over because someone's whiskered friend decided gravity needed testing. One sleek tabby brushes against your legs, and you can't help but smile. You remember hearing that some modern scholars still argue whether cats were ever truly domesticated in Egypt, or whether Egyptians simply agreed to cohabitate with them on equal terms. Judging by the superior tilt of this cat's ears, you're leaning toward the second theory. You kneel by a low altar, watching as one of the priests sets down an offering of fish, its silver scales catching the torchlight. The cats come forward in a line, tails held high as though participating in the ceremony themselves. The priest mutters something about divine blessings, though you suspect the cats are more interested in the smell than the spirituality. Still, their presence isn't just tolerated, it's honored. Cats weren't just pets, they were bridges to the divine, symbols of balance and guardianship. A single purr might be read as a sign of favor from Bastet herself. A breeze carries in the desert chill, and you shiver as you wrap your linen shawl closer. In the distance, you hear the Nile whispering like a giant snake in the dark, its waters swollen with the rhythm of the season. The river sustains everything, from crops to fish to the humble bowl of milk you carried earlier. Without it, you and the temple cats alike wouldn't last a week. Still, it's not all serene harmony. Cats can be troublemakers, and more than one temple record hints that felines occasionally toppled precious oil lamps or left their paw prints in freshly painted murals. Imagine being the artist who had just spent days painting a flawless hieroglyph scene, only to find tiny claw marks etched into your masterpiece. Historians love those details. They humanize the past in ways grand battles never could. One elder priest chuckles softly nearby, telling you a story of how a cat once wandered onto the lap of a visiting noble during a ceremony. The noble froze, unsure whether to push the animal away or endure its kneading paws, while everyone else whispered about whether Bastet herself had just chosen him for favor or for punishment. That's the thing, the Egyptians could be both reverent and amused by cats, seeing them as both divine beings and absolute little chaos goblins. You settle into your nightly rhythm, stroking a sleek black cat who has decided your lap is now sacred ground. Its fur is warm, its breathing steady, and for a moment, the temple feels less intimidating, more like a shared living room between gods and humans. And yet, in the back of your mind, you remember the darker side. Harming a cat, even by accident, was considered a serious crime in Egypt. Some records suggest execution, others hint at heavy fines or ritual penance. Scholars still argue whether this was applied universally or only to temple cats, but either way, you definitely don't want to test it. You adjust your posture carefully so the cat doesn't fall. The night stretches on. You hear chanting ebb and swell from the inner sanctum. The priests' voices are low, rhythmic, designed to lull even the restless into calm. Cats curl into balls at their feet, their tails twitching in dream sleep. Somewhere a jar clinks, a rat squeaks, and then silence returns, broken only by purrs and the shuffle of your own breathing. You realize that, here in this moonlit sanctum, you're part of something both humble and eternal, the gentle careers of Egyptian cat keepers, whispered along with the sands of time. And so you keep watching, keep tending, half guardian, half servant, fully aware that history may forget your name but not the purring shadows who rule the temple corridors. Your first true test comes sooner than you expected. The older keepers had smirked when they told you that feeding cats is the easiest part. Now you realize they left out the fine print. Feeding cats is easy, feeding temple cats, under the judgmental gaze of both the animals and the priests, is a kind of initiation ritual. You shuffle across the courtyard carrying a woven basket that smells like a fishmonger's stall exploded inside it. The cats know what's coming before you even set it down. They're everywhere, perched on the edges of columns, tucked into the shadows of painted shrines, even balanced high on a lintel as if gravity is just a suggestion. Their eyes glint like tiny lanterns in the torchlight, and their tails twitch in unison. This is not you feeding them, it's them deciding whether you're worthy. The first handful of fish is gone in a flash of claws and whiskers. One ginger tom bats at your wrist like you're a clumsy apprentice who didn't present the offering fast enough. You wince but keep your composure. Losing your patience with cats is a rookie mistake. They'll hold a grudge longer than a pharaoh holds a throne. It's said in whispers that Bastet herself favors the patient. You try to imagine what she'd think of your fish-splattered tunic. Probably not impressed. Still, you find a rhythm. A quick toss here, a careful placement there, and soon the cats are darting and weaving, their soft paws pattering against the stone. The priests pass by with knowing smiles, amused at your initiation. Historically, temple keepers really were responsible for caring for sacred animals, and cats were often given better diets than ordinary people. Some records even suggest fish prepared with herbs, almost gourmet by ancient standards. You glance down at the silver-scaled feast in your basket and think about how many families outside the temple walls would envy this feline buffet. But temple life is full of contradictions. You might think the cats were treated as royalty, and yes, in some ways they were, but they also had to earn their keep. Rodents threatened grain supplies, and cats were expected to hunt. The priests saw it as divine balance, food as offering, and labor as blessing. You, on the other hand, see it as cats managing to secure free meals while still being praised for their occasional mouse chase. Clever creatures. One small calico pads closer, eyeing you with a squint that says you're not quite living up to her standards. You offer a morsel of fish, but she sniffs, flicks her tail, and walks away with the air of a queen dismissing her servant. You stifle a laugh, remembering something an elder once told you: the cats aren't ours. We're theirs. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians ever truly domesticated cats at all, or if the animals simply realized humans made excellent suppliers of food and warm sleeping platforms. Watching this calico strut, you're leaning toward the latter. As the last fish is distributed, you sit on a low bench, exhausted by the controlled chaos. A chorus of purrs fills the courtyard, a sound that vibrates through your bones and settles your nerves. You stroke the nearest cat, its fur soft beneath your fingers, and think about the irony. Outside these temple walls, Egypt is full of noise and toil, merchants shouting, workers hauling stone, soldiers drilling in the sand. Inside, your world narrows to bowls, baskets, and the approving blink of a cat. It's oddly comforting, even if you're still not sure whether you passed the trial. The night deepens, and with it, the sounds of ritual. A priest chants in the sanctuary, his voice rising and falling like a lullaby. The cats seem attuned to it, their tails swaying in rhythm. Some curl up at your feet, their small bodies radiating warmth. You catch yourself wondering if perhaps the cats hear something you don't, some divine hum that connects them more closely to Bastet. Maybe that's why they always seem one step ahead, or why their gaze can feel like it pierces through your clumsy human soul. Just when you're starting to relax, a commotion breaks out near the granary door. A rat, bold as a drunk sailor, scurries across the threshold. 3 cats instantly leap to action, streaking across the stones like arrows. The chase is brief, ending in a squeak that echoes far too loudly. One cat proudly drops the prize at your feet. The priests nearby nod approvingly, as though this, too, is part of the evening ritual. You can't help but grin at the irony, all that fish, and still, nothing excites them more than the thrill of the hunt. The elder keeper claps a hand on your shoulder. Now, he murmurs, you're part of the temple. You nod, though you're not sure whether he means because you survived the feeding frenzy, or because the cats deigned to include you in their rodent-slaying team. Either way, your career has begun, sealed not with a ceremony of trumpets and banners, but with the soft scrape of claws against stone and a half-eaten fish scale stuck to your tunic. As you settle back down, the cats gather around, some curling into sleep, others grooming fastidiously as though they're preparing for an audience with Bastet herself. You watch them with a mix of awe and bemusement. They're both ordinary animals and extraordinary symbols, creatures that make you laugh one moment and bow your head the next. And maybe that's the secret of why they ruled Egyptian temples with such quiet authority. They were always more than what they seemed. The temple grows quieter as the night stretches on, though the quiet never lasts long here. You carry a small tray of incense cones, their resinous scent sharp and sweet, meant to be burned during the midnight rites. The priests gather in the inner hall, their linen robes swaying, their voices low and steady. The whole chamber seems to breathe with them, the stone itself humming along to the rhythm of words older than memory. And in the middle of all this solemnity, cats. Dozens of them. They slink between kneeling priests, they leap up onto low altars, and they weave themselves into the sacred procession as if they own the place. Which, if we're honest, they kind of do. You find yourself standing off to the side, clutching your incense tray like a nervous apprentice at a theater rehearsal, praying the cats don't decide tonight is the night to knock over a torch. One tabby climbs onto the shoulder of a priest mid-chant, curling its tail across his shaved head like some kind of divine headpiece. He doesn't falter, probably used to it, but the corners of a few other priests' mouths twitch as if stifling laughter. The Egyptians were serious about ritual, but even they knew that cats refused to follow choreography. They were living symbols of Bastet, yes, but also streaks of unpredictable chaos in a world obsessed with order. The incense burns, smoke spiraling up into the vaulted ceiling, and the cats seem intoxicated by it. Their eyes glimmer, their paws knead the ground, and their bodies sway as though they, too, are part of the ritual. You think of how in modern times cats go bananas for catnip. Perhaps the temple's myrrh and frankincense had a similar effect. Historians still argue whether cats truly participated in rituals by intent or simply by accident, But either way, their presence became impossible to ignore. The chanting grows louder. Drums join in, low thuds that echo through your chest. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over you, until a sudden yowl cuts through the harmony like a knife. Your eyes snap open. A pair of cats are wrestling in the corner, rolling dangerously close to an offering bowl filled with carefully arranged lotus flowers. One swift paw swipe, and the bowl tips, water splashing, petals scattering like confetti across the sacred floor. Every priest freezes. For a heartbeat, the only sound is the dripping of water. Then, slowly, the high priest raises his hands and resumes chanting as though nothing happened. The others follow his lead. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. The cats, of course, saunter away looking smug, tails high as though they've just been applauded for their performance. The night deepens. You kneel by the doorway, still holding your incense tray, and watch the ceremony unfold. You wonder how many generations of cat keepers before you had the same thought, that maybe the cats weren't just tolerated here but were deliberately allowed to mingle, because their unpredictable energy reminded everyone of life's fragility. Egypt's gods thrived on symbolism, and cats were a perfect embodiment of duality, both gentle and ferocious, playful and deadly, domesticated yet untamable. One of the priests leans close and whispers that cats are said to guard the temple from spirits, prowling in both this world and the unseen one. You glance at the shadows where several cats sit perfectly still, eyes gleaming like lanterns. Do they see something you don't? You shiver despite the incense heat, telling yourself it's just the draft. But the thought lingers. And then, as if to prove your point, a small black kitten wanders straight toward the innermost shrine, a space even you are not allowed to approach. You hold your breath. The priests continue chanting, but you can feel their attention shift, waiting. The kitten stops before the statue of Bastet, curls into a ball at the goddess's feet, and begins to purr. The sound is tiny but somehow fills the chamber, threading itself into the rhythm of drums and chants. A few of the priests smile softly. It feels like an omen, though whether of good fortune or mischief, you can't decide. The ritual winds down, chants softening, incense reduced to glowing embers. The priests disperse into the hallways, their sandals whispering against the stone. You remain behind to tidy up, collecting bowls, sweeping petals, and pretending not to notice the paw prints smudged into the sacred chalk lines. The cats follow you lazily, curling into piles or grooming themselves with studied indifference. You pause at the doorway, glancing back one last time. The statue of Bastet looms in the flickering torchlight, serene and watchful. At her base, the kitten still sleeps, its tiny body rising and falling in perfect rhythm. You feel a sudden warmth in your chest, a sense that you've witnessed something beyond ordinary life, something that connects humans, animals, and gods in a single breath. Or maybe you're just sleep-deprived and covered in fish guts. Hard to tell. Outside, the stars are sharp against the desert sky, and the cool air feels refreshing after the heady smoke of the sanctuary. You carry the memory of the chanting, the laughter, and the chaos of midnight meows with you, knowing that tomorrow it will happen all over again. And strangely, you're already looking forward to it. Morning sunlight slants into the archive chamber, thin golden beams sneaking through carved stone slits high in the wall. Dust dances in the air, and somewhere above you a pigeon coos, unimpressed by the sanctity of knowledge. The archive is supposed to be a quiet refuge, a place where priests pore over sacred scrolls, their ink-darkened fingers tracing words of power and ritual. But here you are, clutching a bundle of papyrus sheets while two temple cats treat the chamber like their personal gymnasium. One leaps onto the low wooden table, scattering carefully stacked scrolls across the floor. The other swipes at the dangling edge of a reed pen, leaving a smear of ink across a document that probably took a scribe 3 days to complete. You groan under your breath and lunge forward, scooping up the scrolls like a frantic parent grabbing homework before it hits the soup. The irony is not lost on you. Egypt's temples were renowned for their libraries, some holding texts that rivaled the great collections of the world. Knowledge was power, and papyrus was precious. And yet, here you are, watching a ginger tomcat chew on the edge of a scroll that might contain a hymn to Osiris. You pry it gently from his jaws, muttering a half apology to the gods. Still, you can't be too angry. Cats, after all, were sacred in their own way, and the priests would rather see paw prints across a text than rats gnawing holes in one. That's your job, to walk the delicate balance between preserving wisdom and respecting the temple's living symbols. You lay the rescued scrolls back on the table, smoothing their edges, and place a small woven mat nearby. Immediately, the tomcat hops onto it, curls up, and purrs as though it had been his idea all along. You start to tidy the shelves, stacking rolled papyrus into niches carved in the wall. The smell of ink and old reeds lingers in the air, mingling with the faint musk of cats. There's a rhythm to it: straighten, dust, rescue, repeat. One moment you're in awe of the preservation of knowledge, the next you're trying to keep claw marks out of the margin notes. Historians still argue whether scribes kept cats deliberately in archives to deter pests or whether the animals simply invited themselves in. Judging by the shredded corner of the hymnal in your hands, you'd bet on the latter. You pause to admire the neat black lines of hieroglyphs on a newly written scroll. The characters seem alive, tiny owls and snakes and suns marching across the papyrus. And then, smack! A striped paw slaps across the surface, smudging the ink into a dark smear. You sigh, gently nudging the cat aside, and wonder if somewhere in eternity a god is laughing at your struggle. One of the elder priests enters, eyebrows raised at the scene of scattered scrolls and lounging cats. But instead of scolding, he simply chuckles. The goddess likes her creatures close to wisdom, he murmurs, as if this explains everything. Maybe it does. Maybe a few paw prints in the archives are a blessing, not a nuisance. Still, you secretly wish Bastet's chosen creatures were just a touch tidier. In the corner, a scribe scratches away at fresh papyrus, his reed pen making soft rasping sounds. A cat sprawls across his lap, fast asleep, and he writes with one arm awkwardly twisted to avoid disturbing it. You stifle a laugh. Even in sacred work, cats dictate the terms. Later, people may look at these ancient manuscripts in awe of their precision and artistry, never guessing the number of times a furry editor knocked the pen clean out of a scribe's hand. You pick up a basket of scraps, reeds trimmed from pens, worn-out papyrus sheets, and fragments too small to save. The moment you set it down, two kittens dive into it, batting at the scraps as though it's the grandest toy chest. Their squeaks and tumbles echo against the stone walls, and you can't help but smile. Knowledge is serious business, but cats never let you forget that life has a playful edge too. There's a rumor among the keepers that one of the temple cats once clawed a sacred hymn so badly it had to be recopied from memory. Some say it was a disaster, others whisper it was divine intervention, that the hymn was flawed, and Bastet herself corrected it by paw. Scholars still debate whether that story is true or just a bit of feline-flavored folklore, but tonight, as you watch a kitten shred a scrap into ribbons, you're not sure you dismiss it. The day stretches on. You carefully roll and shelve texts, the cat supervising with languid eyes. Outside, the sound of the Nile drifts faintly in, a reminder of the larger world beyond these walls. Inside, your universe is ink, papyrus, and purring interruptions. You imagine, centuries from now, someone unrolling a scroll and finding the faint impression of claws pressed into the fibers, a silent signature of the temple's true guardians. By the time the sun dips low, the archive feels calmer. The cats curl into their chosen corners, content after a day of disruption and naps. You leave the chamber slowly, closing the heavy door behind you, though you know full well they'll find a way back in tomorrow. After all, the archive may belong to the gods and the priests, but the cats have clearly claimed it too. The day begins with noise, the kind of noise that's impossible to ignore. Market vendors shout over one another, the smell of salted fish and spices fills the hot air, and somewhere a child is crying because someone else snatched the last date from the tray. You're weaving through the chaos of the fish market, clutching a woven basket, your nose wrinkling at the overwhelming aroma of scales, guts, and smoke. This is one of your least glamorous duties as a temple cat keeper, securing the daily feast for your whiskered overlords. The cats back at the temple don't care that you had to haggle for half an hour or that you're sweating through your linen tunic under the sun. They only care that the fish arrives fresh, preferably wriggling. You pause at a stall where a fisherman slaps down a catch straight from the Nile, silver scales still shimmering. The cats will approve, you think, though the price makes you wince. You barter with exaggerated sighs, tossing in the argument that Bastet's own temple requires this. The fisherman narrows his eyes but knows he can't say no to divine obligation. The truth is, temple cats were often spoiled with diets far richer than ordinary families could afford. Archaeologists have found evidence of cats being fed choice fish and even bits of poultry. Some were so plump that their bones reveal a life of luxurious meals, hardly the lean mouses people imagine. You chuckle to yourself, your feline charges live better than half the city. But if Bastet's guardians demand the best, who are you to argue? As you shuffle back with your basket full of fish, the heat of midday presses down like a heavy hand. Flies buzz insistently, and you swat them away, muttering. You glance at the Nile glittering in the distance and wonder how many more fish it can give before running dry. Historians still argue whether overfishing was a concern in ancient Egypt, though standing here dripping sweat with your basket, you mostly just argue with your aching shoulders. Back in the temple, the cats have been waiting. Somehow, they know the exact moment you step through the gate. They gather like a furry committee, eyes gleaming, tails flicking, as though about to conduct a very stern evaluation of your shopping choices. You set the basket down carefully, and immediately paws dive in, claws clacking against wicker. One fish hits the floor with a wet smack, and the room erupts into chaos, hissing, batting, fur flying. You sigh, kneeling down to play referee. There's an art to feeding them, one you're still learning. Place the fish too close together, and fights break out. Spread them too far apart, and a greedy tomcat will try to claim 3 at once. Tonight you manage a delicate balance, arranging offerings like a caterer setting out hors d'oeuvres at a royal banquet. Slowly, the cats settle, crouching low as they feast. The sound of crunching bones fills the chamber, unsettling to outsiders, but to you it's oddly satisfying, proof of a job done. You think back to the market smells, the chaos of bargaining, and realize it's worth it for this moment. Rows of sleek bodies lined up, tails curling, jaws busy. One kitten, too small for the bigger scraps, paws hopefully at your sandal. You peel off a soft morsel and place it before her. She squeaks, devours it, and then curls up in your lap as if you've just secured her eternal loyalty. Spoiler, her loyalty lasts about 5 minutes. There are quirks in this daily routine that keep you on your toes. Some cats are picky eaters, turning up their noses at perfectly good fish because they prefer poultry. Others demand to eat in private, slinking away to a dark corner before they'll touch their meal. And then there are the bold ones who steal from the offerings meant for the gods themselves. You once caught a cat dragging off a piece of sacrificial goose, feathers trailing across the sacred floor. You swore the goddess Bastet winked at you that night. Among the keepers, there's a running joke that cats secretly hold the temple hostage. If they weren't fed properly, who knows what divine punishment might fall? And perhaps it's not just a joke. A Greek traveler once wrote that Egyptians would go to absurd lengths to save a cat, even in fires, sometimes ignoring their own homes to protect the animals. Historians debate whether he exaggerated, But as you watch these sleek creatures lick their paws with smug satisfaction, you're not so sure it's far from the truth. The feast winds down. The cats stretch, bellies full, and wander off to their chosen nap spots. The chamber smells of fish oil and incense smoke, a strange but oddly comforting perfume. You gather the bones into a clay bowl, carrying them out to be buried beyond the walls, a small ritual of respect even for scraps. The priests nod in approval, satisfied that balance has been maintained. Back inside, you find two cats perched on a low altar, grooming each other in perfect synchronization. Their bodies gleam in the torchlight, eyes half closed in feline serenity. Watching them, you realize that this isn't just about feeding animals, it's about sustaining a living symbol of divine presence. Every fish tossed, every morsel shared, is part of a bigger rhythm that ties the temple to the cosmos. Of course, none of that stops one of them from vomiting a half-digested fish tail on your sandals a moment later. The gods may be eternal, but cat stomachs, always unpredictable. The temple has its routines, the chants, the incense, the endless scrubbing of sandstone floors that will just get dusty again tomorrow. But every so often, things shift, the air grows heavier, and you find yourself on duty when royalty arrives. Not just your average noble with too many rings and an entourage that smells of imported oils, but a full-on pharaoh's procession. Trumpets blare outside the gate, soldiers march in polished rows, and suddenly the temple cats are in the spotlight. You're standing near the main courtyard when the pharaoh enters, his kohl-rimmed eyes scanning the space, gold glinting from every fold of his attire. The priests bow deeply, chanting blessings, but the cats barely bother to lift their heads. A few flick their tails, one yawns, and a particularly audacious kitten leaps straight into the path of the royal sandal. You freeze. Everyone freezes. The kitten blinks up at the ruler of Egypt, stretches, and then proceeds to curl up right there, as if the polished stones were laid out just for her nap. The pharaoh pauses. A priest stifles a cough. Then, slowly, the ruler bends down, scoops up the kitten, and tucks it into the crook of his arm. The crowd exhales as one. You think you hear someone whisper that Bastet herself guided the cat's boldness. You're just glad no one stepped on her tail. There's a strange tension whenever nobles and cats interact. On one hand, royalty showered the animals with gifts. Archaeologists have found tiny gold and bejeweled collars placed on temple cats, the kind of bling you'd expect on a pharaoh, not a mouser. On the other hand, there's a quiet power in the cat's indifference. The highest noble could bend low, offer a delicacy, and the cat might still turn away, tail high in haughty dismissal. You try not to laugh when you remember last month's scene, a visiting general kneeling with a roasted pigeon, only to have the cat ignore him and run to chew on your sandal string instead. The court interprets such behavior with deadly seriousness. If a cat favors a noble, it's considered a sign of divine blessing. If a cat scratches them, well, historians still argue whether that was read as a curse or just written off as typical cat behavior. You suspect a little of both, depending on how much wine was flowing. As the ceremony unfolds, you find yourself moving through the shadows, ensuring the cats are comfortable. You refill bowls of milk, discreetly shoo away the ones sniffing too close to the royal offerings, and try not to trip over the tabby who insists on wrapping around your legs like a living rope. The pharaoh sits in a carved chair of ebony, priests chanting in cadence, while 3 cats curl at his feet as though the gods themselves arranged it. One noblewoman leans down, stroking the sleek fur of a black cat, murmuring about fertility blessings. The cat tolerates this for exactly 5 seconds before leaping into your arms, claws digging in as if you're the safer option. You stifle a wince and bow awkwardly, trying to look like this was absolutely part of the ceremony. The noblewoman narrows her eyes, but the priests smile. It must mean the goddess has claimed you as her chosen servant for the evening. Which, given the bleeding scratch down your wrist, feels like a mixed honor. There are whispers in the court about cats being used for political theater. Imagine it, a noble accidentally ensuring a cat curls up in his lap right as the pharaoh enters, hoping to be seen as favored. You've overheard keepers joke about slipping extra fish to certain cats to make them gravitate toward the right people. Whether that's true or just gossip, you're not sure. Historians still argue about how much cats influenced politics, but you've seen enough sly glances tonight to believe the idea isn't far-fetched. Later, after the offerings have been made and the priests lead the chanting procession back into the inner halls, you're left in the courtyard with the fading echoes of music and the lingering scent of incense. The pharaoh has departed, his golden entourage trailing like a comet's tail, but the cats remain, stretching and grooming as though nothing extraordinary happened. One licks a paw, another chases a moth through the torchlight, and the kitten, yes, the bold little one, still snoozes contentedly where royalty once stood. You crouch beside her, stroking her soft fur, and think about the strange balance of power here. Pharaohs ruled nations, commanded armies, built monuments that touched the sky. But in this courtyard, under the quiet gaze of Bastet, a single kitten held the pharaoh's attention longer than any priest's hymn. It's almost comical, if not humbling. The divine works in mysterious ways, sometimes through floods and plagues, sometimes through a whiskered nap in the wrong place at the right time. You rise, brushing sand from your tunic, and gather the empty offering bowls. The night feels lighter, the pressure lifted with the departure of royalty. The cats scatter into shadows, tails swaying like banners, and you follow them back toward the sanctuary. Tomorrow, there will be no pharaoh, no jeweled collars, just the ordinary chaos of feeding, cleaning, and shooing. And maybe that's the point. For all their indifference to power, the cats are the great equalizers of the temple. Noble, priest, keeper, everyone is subject to the same purring judgment. Your hands smell of herbs tonight, a sticky blend of frankincense, honey, and something that might be garlic, or it might just be the memory of garlic. You sit cross-legged on the cool stone floor, a low lamp flickering beside you, grinding powders with a mortar and pestle. The cats crowd close, curious but suspicious, their noses twitching at every sharp scent. You mutter to them like patients in a waiting room, "Yes, yes, one at a time, please. No scratching the healer." The truth is, being a temple cat keeper isn't just about feeding and watching. You're also the on-call doctor for every ear scratch, limp, or suspicious rash. Ancient Egyptians were nothing if not inventive in their medicine, and cats benefited from that ingenuity. You grind together herbs to soothe irritated skin, remembering a recipe the elder priest recited, frankincense mixed with goose fat, sometimes with a dash of honey. It smells terrible but works wonders on infected scratches. The cats don't exactly thank you, but they tolerate it, which is close enough to divine praise in your line of work. One black Tom glares at you as you approach with the ointment, as if aware of what's coming. He swipes at your hand, narrowly missing the jar. You sigh. Cats may have been revered, but they didn't suddenly transform into model patients. You wrap him in a scrap of linen like a struggling burrito, smear the ointment on his ear, and pray he doesn't escape until the mixture dries. You'll spend the rest of the evening with claw marks anyway, but at least his infection won't spread. Medicine in the temple is a strange dance of science and magic. For every practical cure, a poultice, a cleaned wound, a herbal salve, there's a whispered spell to go with it. Priests believe words have power, so they chant over your jars as if the syllables themselves can ward off fleas. You're not sure whether the cats care about the magic, but the rhythmic chanting does seem to calm them. Or maybe they're just laughing at the idea of humans trying to control anything at all. Historians still argue whether temple healers truly understood the causes of feline illness, or if they mostly treated symptoms while leaving the rest to divine intervention. Looking at the half-distracted stare of your black tomcat patient, you'd guess the cats weren't giving much feedback. Still, archaeological finds of cat mummies reveal they were often cared for well into old age, evidence that keepers like you tried to ease their aches and pains. It's strangely comforting to think your nightly ointment duties might echo across thousands of years. And of course, there are the oddities, the treatments that sound like they were invented on a particularly sleep-deprived night. A paste of crocodile dung to ward off fleas. You try not to imagine collecting that. A concoction of onions and milk for digestive issues, though it's more likely to offend the cat than heal it. One keeper swears by sprinkling powdered malachite around the sleeping mats to keep pests away. You don't know if it works, but it certainly makes the place look festive, like a festival decoration. You shift to the next patient, a scrawny kitten with a limp. She presses close to your chest as you examine her paw. A thorn is lodged between her pads, and you wince in sympathy. Carefully, you pluck it out, murmuring soothing nonsense. She mews, but then curls tighter against you, trusting in the warmth of your tunic. For all the scratches and chaos, moments like this remind you why the role matters. These cats aren't just sacred symbols, they're living, breathing creatures who hurt, heal, and lean on you. The elder priest enters as you finish, watching silently. He nods once, approving the care you've given. Remember, he says softly, Bastet is not only a goddess of joy, but also of protection. When you tend their wounds, you serve her. You bow your head, though part of you wants to joke that Bastet should consider hiring a few more assistants. Instead, you go back to your jars, trying to coax a particularly rotund cat into swallowing a lump of herbal paste. Spoiler, he spits it back out, twice. Later, the cats stretch across the courtyard under the stars, their ears clean, their wounds dressed. You sit with your pestle and jars, exhausted but oddly peaceful. The night air is sharp, the smell of incense still clings to your skin, and your hands ache from grinding herbs. One by one, the cats curl into sleep, purring softly, their bellies rising and falling like tiny drums. You let yourself imagine, just for a moment, that the goddess herself smiles on your work tonight. And then, of course, a tabby coughs up a furball directly into the ointment jar. Divine favor always comes with conditions. The call comes at dawn, soft and serious. A priest touches your shoulder while you're still half asleep in your corner of the keeper's quarters. One of them has passed, he whispers, and you're instantly awake. There's no groaning, no reaching for your sandals, no joking about your sore back. Death is not a small thing here, not for humans, and certainly not for cats. You follow him into the inner sanctuary, where incense already burns in thick spirals. On a low mat lies the body of a tabby you've known for years, her striped fur still soft, her eyes closed as if in sleep. You kneel beside her, stroking the curve of her head one last time. She had been slowing down for weeks, her steps cautious, her naps longer. Still, the absence hits harder than you expect. Around her, the other cats circle quietly, as though they, too, understand the shift. The process begins immediately. Unlike in the outer world, where a dead animal might simply be buried in sand, temple cats are honored with full rites. You and the elder keeper prepare the linen strips, the oils, the tiny amulets to be tucked between layers. Cat mummification wasn't rare, it was an entire industry. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of feline mummies, some carefully prepared, others rushed and sold to pilgrims. But within the temple, the care is genuine. Each binding is an act of devotion, a way to ensure the cat's spirit rests close to Bastet. You clean her gently, anointing her fur with cedar oil and resin. The scent is sharp, clinging to your hands. Then the linen comes, strip after strip, winding around her small frame with slow, reverent movements. The process feels endless, but it also feels right, each layer a whisper of gratitude, a memory sealed in cloth. You tuck a small bronze amulet of Bastet beneath the final wrap, pressing it to the heart that once purred. Historians still argue whether every mummified cat was a beloved temple companion or if many were bred solely for offerings. But kneeling here, binding the body of one you fed, healed, and laughed at, you can't mistake the sincerity. This was family, not commodity. The burial chamber waits, cool and dim, lined with niches carved into the stone. You place her gently into one, joining rows of other small linen-wrapped forms. The air is heavy with history, with devotion piled layer upon layer like the wrappings themselves. A priest chants softly, words you've heard 100 times but tonight feel different, heavier. The goddess's name echoes in the chamber, blending with the faint smell of resin and the unshakable sense of continuity. And yet, even here, there's room for the absurd. As you finish the rites, a living cat jumps onto the stone shelf, batting at the linen bundle you've just placed. You and the priest both lunge forward, horrified, but the cat simply curls up beside the mummy and closes its eyes. The priest hesitates, then chuckles softly. She has a companion for the journey. You can't help but laugh through the lump in your throat. Leave it to a cat to disrupt even the most solemn ritual. Later, when the chamber is sealed again, you sit outside in the courtyard, watching the sun climb. The temple feels different now, quieter, as though holding its breath. You remember the tabby's quirks, how she always stole scraps from your basket, how she once climbed onto a noble's lap during a ceremony and refused to leave. Those memories flicker in your mind like torchlight. One of the kittens tumbles across your lap, demanding attention, as if to remind you that life doesn't pause for grief. You stroke her tiny head and feel a small spark of comfort. Bastet is goddess of joy as well as protection, after all, and perhaps the lesson is that mourning and laughter can sit side by side. The priests believe each cat's soul joins Bastet in her eternal domain, guarding and comforting her. You're not sure what you believe, but when you close your eyes, you imagine the tabby trotting off into the afterlife, tail high, ready to claim the goddess's lap for her own. The thought makes you smile. And just when you think the moment can't get any more bittersweet, one of the living cats coughs up a furball on your sandal during the closing chant. Death, devotion, and comedy always hand in paw. You've just finished cleaning the burial chamber when word spreads, a great festival is approaching, one of the yearly celebrations of Bastet. And if ordinary days in the temple feel like juggling incense smoke and purring chaos, festival days are like trying to ride a chariot pulled by cats themselves, glorious, unpredictable, and full of scratches. The preparations begin weeks ahead. Priests polish statues until they gleam, artisans carve new amulets to sell to pilgrims, and you're suddenly responsible for making sure the temple cats are presentable. Yes, presentable. As if 100 whiskered anarchists will agree to bathe, preen, and line up like a parade squad. You haul buckets of warm water, herbal oils, and soft cloths into the courtyard, steeling yourself for battle. One by one, you attempt to clean them, coaxing, bribing, and occasionally bargaining like a desperate merchant. Some tolerate a damp cloth across their fur, blinking slowly as if they know they'll be admired. Others squirm, yowl, and bolt the moment water touches their whiskers. A striped tom even manages to kick a whole bucket onto your lap, leaving you to parade around in what looks like an accidental linen toga. You mutter that Bastet must be laughing from above. Still, progress happens. By festival eve, the cats look sleek, their coats shining under lamplight. A few even sport decorative collars, woven beads, tiny bronze pendants, nothing too heavy. Archaeological finds suggest some temple cats really were adorned for ritual days, and you can see why. When they strut through the halls, tails high, they look like living jewels. On the festival morning, the temple erupts. Pilgrims pour through the gates, carrying flowers, baskets of bread, jars of beer. Musicians play flutes and sistrums, the metallic jingling echoing across the stone walls. You guide the cats carefully into the main courtyard, knowing their presence is central to the day. Bastet's image is carried in procession, a statue gleaming with gold leaf, and the cats sprawl around it as though they personally endorsed her divinity. The crowd cheers, tossing petals that drift across the floor like soft rain. Children reach out to stroke the cats, giggling when a paw bats playfully at their fingers. The animals absorb the attention with their usual range of reactions: indifference, charm, or outright disdain. One ginger leaps straight into a food basket, devouring a piece of roasted goose before you can even blink. You snatch him up, but the crowd just laughs. Clearly, the goddess wanted that goose. Historians still argue whether these festivals were more religious or more social, half piety, half excuse for a good party. Looking around at the overflowing beer jars, the dancing, the music, you suspect the answer is both. Religion here isn't about solemn silence but about joy, noise, and community. Bastet isn't just a protector, she's a bringer of pleasure, music, and celebration. And her cats, lounging like royalty among mortals, embody that balance perfectly. At one point, you notice something curious. A group of pilgrims kneel before a particularly serene white cat, leaving offerings at her paws: flowers, figs, even a small carved figurine. They murmur prayers directly to her, as if she were Bastet herself. You wonder if it's blasphemy or simply devotion in a purer form. After all, if cats are her messengers, why not pray to the messenger? Historians still debate whether cats were worshipped in their own right or simply revered as extensions of the goddess. Standing here, you feel the line blur. The day rolls on in a whirl of sound and scent: roasted meats, perfumed oils, spilled beer sticky on the stones. You find yourself ferrying cats between crowds, rescuing kittens from underfoot, and occasionally pretending not to notice when one sharp-clawed rascal steals directly from the offering table. A priest catches your eye during one such theft but only shrugs, muttering, "Bastet takes what Bastet wants." As the sun dips low, the energy shifts. The statue of Bastet is returned to the sanctuary, the chants soften, and people begin to drift out through the gates, their arms full of purchased amulets and lingering joy. The temple grows quiet again, petals scattered across the ground, half-empty jars forgotten in corners. The cats stretch luxuriously, as though they've just endured their greatest performance and are now ready for well-earned naps. You sink onto the steps, utterly drained but oddly uplifted. A kitten climbs into your lap, batting at a stray flower petal, and you let your head tilt back to watch the fading light. Festivals may be chaotic, exhausting, and occasionally humiliating. Your still damp sandals squish unpleasantly, but they remind you why you serve here. The cats aren't just guardians, they're symbols of joy, of life's unpredictable humor, of the goddess's presence in the everyday. And just when you're about to drift into a festival-stained nap, one of the older cats tips over a forgotten jar of beer and begins lapping it up with gusto. You sigh, scoop him away, and mutter, "Somebody's going to regret that in the morning." Sacred or not, some problems are timeless. The festival has passed, but the temple doesn't fall silent for long. Life flows back into its rhythm of incense, offerings, and endless sweeping of sand that seems determined to sneak in no matter how often you sweep. Yet, in the midst of this daily hum, something less expected happens. You receive visitors not from the royal court or the priesthood, but from ordinary people. Farmers, merchants, mothers balancing toddlers on their hips, they come seeking blessings from the temple cats themselves. At first, you don't know what to do. You're not exactly authorized to dole out divine favor. But the priests, perhaps amused, wave you on. So you guide the visitors into the courtyard, where the cats lounge in all their usual disinterested glory. A woman places her basket of dates at the feet of a sleek black cat, murmuring about her daughter's health. The cat yawns, blinks, and promptly curls up on the basket. The woman beams, convinced the goddess has heard her prayer. You shrug. If Bastet works through naps and paw prints, who are you to argue? Others bring small tokens, scraps of meat, beads, even simple clay toys for the kittens. The cats respond in their usual unpredictable ways. Some leap eagerly into laps, purring loudly as though to confirm the prayers. Others vanish into shadows, uninterested in mortal concerns. One tabby chooses to plant herself directly on a merchant's headscarf, kneading with sharp claws while he winces but refuses to move, because clearly, this must mean the goddess favors his request for a good harvest. Historians still argue whether ordinary Egyptians genuinely saw these moments as divine encounters or whether it was more about the comfort of ritual. Watching tonight, you suspect it's both. People want to believe their struggles, sickness, hunger, uncertainty matter to the gods. And what better sign than a living, breathing creature choosing their lap? It's unpredictable, unstageable, and somehow more convincing than a priest's carefully rehearsed chant. Of course, not every encounter goes smoothly. A child runs forward to pet a white cat, only to receive a sharp scratch across the hand. He bursts into tears, and you rush to comfort him, dabbing the cut with linen. His mother doesn't scold the cat, instead, she whispers that the goddess must be warning her son to be more respectful. You glance at the cat, now calmly licking her paw, and wonder if Bastet ever planned it that way or if cats just do whatever they like, leaving humans to invent meaning afterward. One quirky tidbit you've heard is that some pilgrims clipped whiskers or snipped fur from temple cats to keep as charms. You can't confirm it, but you've definitely caught a farmer reaching suspiciously close to a tomcat's face before the animal hissed and bolted. Honestly, if anyone tried to steal a whisker from you while you napped, you'd hiss too. The priests occasionally intervene, offering structured blessings in front of the cats. They chant, wave incense, and interpret feline behavior as omens. A paw raised might mean success, a twitching tail might signal trouble. You're not entirely convinced the cats care about their role as prophets. Last week, a priest solemnly declared that Bastet approved of a woman's new marriage right before the cat sneezed in her lap and leapt away. Divine approval, with allergies. Still, you can't deny the comfort the animals bring. You've seen tired mothers relax as a cat curls against them, merchants laugh as kittens chase each other through offerings, and old men leave with lighter steps after stroking a warm furry back. The goddess may or may not speak through these creatures, but the peace they offer is real enough. As night deepens, the visitors leave, their prayers carried home in the soft glow of lamplight. You remain behind, sweeping up flower petals and bits of food, the cats trailing after you like sleepy shadows. One flops dramatically across your broom, making cleaning impossible until you rub her belly. You mutter about lazy assistance, but your heart isn't in the complaint. You think back to the day's parade of hopes and fears, all funneled into the silent judgment of whiskered faces. There's something humbling about it, that people pin their deepest wishes not on marble statues or royal decrees, but on the choice of a cat to curl up beside them. Maybe faith is always a little absurd, but maybe that's what makes it work. And then, just as you're closing the courtyard gate, you hear a loud crash. One of the cats has knocked over the donation jar, scattering copper coins across the floor. You sigh, bend down to collect them, and mutter, Bastet accepts payment in fish, not loose change. The cat blinks, utterly unrepentant. The air feels heavier tonight, as if the temple walls themselves are listening. You're sweeping the courtyard when the elder priest calls you aside with a gravity that makes your broom suddenly seem ridiculous. There is unrest, he says quietly. Whispers beyond the temple. Some see our devotion as dangerous. You've heard murmurs before, jealousy from other cults, unease from outsiders who don't understand why cats are treated with such reverence. But lately, the tension has thickened. Merchants mutter in the market about resources wasted on pampered animals. Foreign traders laugh at the notion of cats being divine. Even some nobles grumble that too much attention goes to Bastet's creatures instead of their own glory. And you, humble keeper, find yourself standing in the crossfire of debates that reach far above your pay grade. The cats, naturally, couldn't care less. They sprawl in the sun, chase beetles, and stalk shadows, oblivious to human politics. But the priests are alert. They remind you to keep the cats safe, to guard against anyone who might harm them. You nod solemnly, though you can't help picturing yourself as a kind of feline bodyguard. Spoiler: cats make terrible clients. They never follow the plan, disappear for hours, and refuse to pay you in anything but hairballs. That night, a delegation arrives from another temple, their leader sharp-eyed and sharp-tongued. He argues with your priests in the great hall, words echoing off the stone. He claims Bastet's cats draw too much devotion, that pilgrims bring offerings here instead of to other gods. You linger at the edge, pretending to polish a lamp, while tension snaps in the air. Historians still argue about how much conflict truly existed between priesthoods, but in this moment, it feels like the cats could spark a full-blown religious turf war. To prove Bastet's favor, your priests point to the cats themselves. As if on cue, a tabby struts into the hall, leaps onto the altar, and curls directly at the base of Bastet's statue. The delegation falls silent. The priests beam. You silently thank the tabby for choosing the most dramatic possible timing. Of course, 5 minutes later she knocks over an offering bowl and scatters dates across the floor, but by then the point has been made. There are other dangers too. Rumors drift in of foreigners who see cats not as sacred but as simple animals, useful, perhaps, but not untouchable. The priests warn you never to let outsiders harm or steal one. The punishment for killing a cat is severe, some say even death. You've never witnessed such a trial, but the fear is real enough that people treat the animals with an odd mixture of awe and terror. Imagine explaining to a neighbor that their crime wasn't theft or assault but stepping on a tabby's tail. Justice in Egypt is, apparently, feline enforced. And yet, even within the temple, debates simmer. Are the cats divine themselves, or merely vessels for the goddess's presence? Some priests argue one way, others another. Historians still argue too, of course, though you'd bet none of them have tried to coax medicine down a cat's throat while wondering if they were spoon-feeding a minor deity. Despite the unrest, you find comfort in the animal's indifference. Tonight, while priests argue and politicians plot, a ginger cat curls in your lap, purring so loudly you feel it in your ribs. You scratch behind her ears, the sound drowning out the tension beyond the walls. Cats don't care about power plays, they care about warmth, food, and occasionally shredding your tunic for fun. Maybe that's their true power, grounding humans in the immediate, reminding you that life isn't always about cosmic battles. Sometimes it's about the joy of a soft paw kneading your knee. Still, you can't ignore the unease. You double-check gates, count heads carefully, and keep the kittens close at night. When one goes missing for half a day, your heart hammers until she returns, tail high, carrying a dead beetle like a trophy. You laugh shakily, relief washing over you. You may not be a warrior or a priest, but you'll guard these creatures with everything you've got. After all, guarding them means guarding the goddess's joy, her presence, her promise of protection. The temple may stand in a storm of debates and envy, but tonight, in the quiet courtyard, you whisper a vow: as long as you breathe, no harm will come to Bastet's cats. The kitten blinks at you, drops her beetle, and immediately pounces on your sandal strap. Your vow, apparently, is less moving than free shoelaces. The temple wakes before dawn, the air cool and still, the stone under your bare feet holding the last chill of night. You stretch, shake off sleep, and immediately begin counting heads. Not priests. Not visitors. Cats. Always cats. You whisper their nicknames under your breath: Stripe, Shadow, Fat Tail, Trouble, just to make sure everyone is accounted for. A few are still missing, of course. Cats have their own sense of punctuality, which is to say, none at all. Once you're confident no one has vanished into thin air, or been stolen by a rival temple, a thought that still haunts you, you start the day's chores. Water bowls are refilled, food scattered, bedding shaken out. The kittens immediately turn the bedding into a wrestling arena, and you mutter that Bastet clearly sent them to test your patience. Temple life runs on routines as much as rituals. Bells mark the hours for chants and offerings, priests bustle about preparing incense, and you keep to your quieter cycle. Feed, clean, heal, repeat. It's not glamorous, but it's essential. You're the invisible hands behind the divine show. When pilgrims see sleek, content cats lounging at Bastet's statue, they assume it's divine serenity. They don't see you chasing a runaway tom out of the pantry at midnight. By mid-morning, you've swept the courtyard, again, though sand keeps sneaking back in like it owns the place. You've washed out bowls and rubbed salves into the ear of a particularly grumpy black cat who clearly suspects you of plotting murder. Then comes your least favorite task, fleas. You kneel in the shade, parting fur, sprinkling herbal powders that smell faintly like garlic and despair. Historians still argue whether these remedies were genuinely effective or more symbolic. Judging by the number of fleas hopping merrily away, you're inclined to think symbolism played a strong role. And yet, the rhythm has its comforts. You know where the sunbeam will fall at noon, and which cats will claim it. You know which kitten always tips over the water bowl, and which elder prefers to nap in the rafters. You've built a map of habits, and moving through it feels like walking inside a living clock. The priests sometimes tease you for your devotion. You're more mother than keeper, one says with a smile as you coax a timid calico from under a bench. You shrug. Caring for these animals is a mix of discipline and affection, sacred duty and simple love. The lines blur, and you don't mind. Of course, the routine isn't flawless. The gods seem to enjoy tossing chaos into your schedule. A group of cats once managed to invade the storeroom, tearing into dried fish meant for offerings. Another time, two toms decided to brawl in the sanctuary mid-prayer, their yowls drowning out the priest's solemn chant. You nearly tore your sandals tripping over them while trying to drag them apart. The worshippers gasped, then laughed, and you wondered if Bastet herself arranged the spectacle just to keep things lively. Still, even amid routine, there are quieter rewards. At dusk, you sit in the courtyard as the cats gather around, their bodies warm against your legs, their purrs blending into a low, steady hum. The temple glows with lamplight, priests chant in the background, and for a moment the world shrinks to a circle of soft fur and flickering shadows. You don't need a noble's gold or a priest's title to feel rich, you just need a purring bundle in your lap. One fringe tidbit you've heard is that some keepers believed cats could predict earthquakes or Nile floods by their behavior. You're not sure if it's true, but you've definitely noticed how they freeze before strange tremors or dash for higher ground when storms roll in. Whether divine foresight or just sharp whiskers, it feels like another layer of mystery in their lives. By the time the stars scatter overhead, you're back to counting heads, just as you did at dawn. A few are still missing, naturally. You sigh, already knowing you'll find them at dawn again, smug and sandy. The cycle never ends, but perhaps that's the point. The goddess doesn't demand grand gestures every day, just the steady rhythm of care, the patience of repetition, the humility of sweeping sand for the 100th time. And when one of the cats curls at your side, kneading your arm as though approving your work, you decide that's enough. Bastet's blessing doesn't always roar like a festival. Sometimes it purrs. The rhythm of temple life is steady, but every so often it collides with the wider world in ways that shake you from your familiar routines. Traders from across the Mediterranean pass through Egypt, their ships groaning with cedar, wine, olive oil, and strange cloths dyed in colors you've never seen. They bring new scents, new faces, and sometimes new opinions about your whiskered charges. One afternoon, you're sweeping the steps when a group of foreign merchants approaches, their clothes stitched differently, their accents rolling oddly. They pause at the sight of cats sprawled in the shade of Bastet's statue. One man laughs, pointing. "You worship those," he says in a language half strange but clear enough. "In our lands, cats are mouses, nothing more." Your jaw tightens. You want to argue, but before you can, one of the temple cats struts over, leaps into the man's lap, and promptly digs in her claws as she makes herself comfortable. His laughter turns into a yelp. The priests chuckle behind you, murmuring that Bastet clearly disapproves of disrespect. You try to hide your grin as you carry on sweeping, silently thanking the cat for her impeccable timing. Foreign views intrigue you, though. Some travelers seem fascinated, almost reverent, watching how pilgrims leave offerings for cats. Others mutter about superstition, shaking their heads as though you've all lost your minds. Historians still argue whether Egypt's feline devotion influenced other cultures or stayed mostly local. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Cats are too clever, too restless to be confined to one people. They slip aboard ships as easily as into storerooms. Indeed, sailors often adopt cats for practical reasons, pest control on long voyages. You've heard stories of cats spreading from Egyptian docks to islands and faraway ports. One trader even claimed his homeland now reveres cats as bringers of luck on the sea, though whether that's true or just a tale told after too much wine, you can't say. The priests handle these encounters diplomatically, explaining that Bastet embodies joy and protection, and cats are her companions. But you notice how the cats themselves ignore borders. They leap into foreign laps as readily as local ones, demanding scratches and snacks with equal entitlement. It's almost as if they're ambassadors of their own kingdom, feline diplomats unconcerned with politics. There's one fringe story circulating among the keepers, that cats purposely guided sailors to safe harbors, their uncanny instincts for weather and tides saving entire crews. You've never sailed beyond the Nile, but you can imagine it, whiskers twitching at the scent of storm winds, paws pacing restlessly before rain, ears flicking at sounds humans can't hear. Whether divine or natural, it makes you wonder how much of history's course has been nudged by soft paws padding across wooden decks. But foreign trade brings more than ideas, it brings risks. One evening, a cat goes missing just as a caravan prepares to leave. Panic erupts among the keepers, the priests ordering gates checked, wagons searched. To harm a cat, let alone steal one, is a crime beyond imagining. You find her eventually, of course, nestled inside a grain sack, purring smugly, as though she planned a little adventure abroad. You scoop her up, heart racing, muttering about how you nearly caused an international incident over her curiosity. Still, moments like that remind you how fragile the temple's order is. To you, cats are family, daily companions. To outsiders, they may be curiosities, pests, or commodities. Historians still argue whether cats were ever traded deliberately as exotic animals. You shudder at the thought. Here, they are divine. Out there, you're not so sure. That night, you sit by the gate, watching the stars while a cat curls at your feet. You imagine them traveling beyond the Nile, slipping onto ships, weaving themselves into the myths of other lands. You picture sailors in foreign tongues praising their sharp claws, farmers abroad laughing at their antics, maybe even priests in faraway temples offering them scraps of fish. It's strange to think of your temple companions wandering so far, but somehow comforting too. Bastet's reach is wider than stone walls. And just as you grow reflective, one of the temple kittens climbs into your lap, chews on the hem of your tunic, and drags your thoughts firmly back to the present. No matter how far cats travel, some things, like ruined clothing, remain universal. You wake to the sound of chanting, low and steady, carrying through the temple like a heartbeat. The priests are deep in their rituals again, summoning blessings from Bastet for the city beyond. You stretch, brush sand from your arms, and immediately begin the usual roll call of tails, ears, and whiskers. Everyone's here, or at least, everyone you can find without crawling into rafters. Good enough. The days blur together sometimes, incense smoke and paw prints marking the hours better than any sundial. And in the midst of this steady rhythm, you begin to realize something. The cats are more than companions, more than sacred symbols. They're teachers, whether or not they mean to be. Their lessons sneak in between feeding times and flea treatments, half hidden in naps and mischief. First, they teach you patience. Try convincing a cat to swallow bitter medicine, and you'll learn more about calm breathing than any meditation scroll. They twist, spit, glare, and somehow manage to leave you with scratches while the paste remains untouched. Yet you try again, softer this time, slower, and eventually they relent. The lesson: not all battles are won by force. Sometimes persistence, even gentleness, is the sharper weapon. Second, they teach you humility. Pharaohs, nobles, priests, everyone bows when cats decide to leap onto their laps. Status collapses under a twitching tail. You've seen grown men accept shredded robes as divine marks, women interpret purrs as prophecies. And you've scrubbed floors, carried fish guts, and laughed when a kitten chewed holes in your best tunic. Cats don't care about pride, and serving them has taught you to hold your own lightly. Third, they teach you balance. Bastet herself embodies both joy and ferocity, and her creatures mirror that duality. A cat can be soft as silk one moment, claws flashing the next. They remind you that life isn't neat, it's contradictions, tenderness wrapped around sharpness, comfort tangled with chaos. Watching them sprawl lazily in the sun after terrorizing a beetle drives the point home. The divine doesn't hide in extremes, but in the messy middle. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians truly believed cats had wisdom to impart or whether people simply projected meaning onto ordinary behavior. But living here, walking barefoot among purring bodies, you can't help but believe there's something deeper. The lessons feel too consistent, too pointed, to be random. There are lighter lessons, too. Cats teach you the art of napping anywhere, anytime, on mats, in baskets, across your lap in the middle of chores. They teach you mischief, slipping into storerooms and knocking over jars just to watch them roll. They even teach you humor. Nothing breaks the solemnity of a royal visit faster than a kitten dangling from a priest's robe. Maybe that's Bastet's gift too, the reminder not to take even holy things too seriously. And beneath it all, the cats teach devotion. Not the loud, performative devotion of priests in gilded collars, but the quiet kind, showing up, day after day, choosing presence over absence. A cat curls beside you not because of grand gestures, but because you were simply there, feeding, stroking, keeping. It's a reminder that faith doesn't always roar, sometimes it purrs. Tonight, as the chants fade and the temple quiets, you sit in the courtyard with the cats draped around you like living cushions. The stars scatter above, and the air smells faintly of myrrh and fur. One kitten presses her paw to your palm, tiny claws barely grazing skin, and you think, this is the essence of your service. Not monuments or scrolls, but a simple, fragile moment of trust. There's a quirky saying among the keepers, you've heard it whispered when someone gets clawed or a food bowl is stolen. Bastet is laughing through them. You're starting to believe it. Every scratch, every ruined tunic, every absurd tumble of kittens into water bowls feels like part of a cosmic joke, one the goddess plays kindly on her servants. You chuckle at the thought, and the cats blink at you as if to say, finally, you understand. And perhaps you do. The temple has given you tasks, scratches, endless sand to sweep, but the cats have given you something quieter, a way of seeing the world softer, stranger, truer. Their lessons are carved not in stone but in fur and whiskers, and maybe that makes them all the more lasting. A breeze stirs, carrying the smell of the river, and the cats shift, curling closer as though gathering warmth. You close your eyes, letting the moment stretch, letting their breathing weave into yours. Somewhere, beyond, priests debate theology, historians will one day argue about meaning. But here, now, the cats are enough. The temple feels quieter now. Not silent, never silent, not with cats, but quieter in a way that makes you notice things you once ignored. The stone walls echo more, the priest's chants seem fewer, and the daily offerings shrink with every passing season. You sweep the same courtyard, refill the same water bowls, but the crowds of pilgrims who once came with baskets of fish and flowers now drift toward other gods, other sanctuaries. You watch the cats adjust as only cats can. They roam through the halls as though they still own the place, which, to be fair, they probably do. Their paws pad over empty altars, their tails curl around crumbling pillars. They don't mourn the way you do. They simply continue, stretching in sunbeams, chasing beetles, curling against your side at dusk. Maybe that's their final lesson, how to survive even when devotion fades. Historians still argue whether temples like this were truly abandoned or slowly transformed, folded into the swirl of shifting religions. You don't need debate to feel the truth beneath your fingertips. The oil lamps burn lower, the chants are softer, and sometimes you swear you hear the sound of new prayers carried in from distant shrines, words not meant for Bastet at all. And yet, the goddess lingers. You see her in the way a cat arches under your hand, in the way a kitten tumbles headlong into mischief, in the way the night sky seems to shimmer when dozens of glowing eyes reflect the stars. Maybe temples can crumble, priests can vanish, scrolls can be forgotten. But as long as a cat curls on someone's lap, Bastet breathes. You find comfort in that thought. Comfort, too, in the idea that what you've done here matters beyond stone and ritual. You've been a keeper of the small, the tender, the overlooked. You've learned that sometimes the holiest work isn't carved on monuments but scattered in paw prints and fur. One fringe tale you've heard whispers of is that the Romans, long after Bastet's worship dimmed, carried Egyptian cats across their empire. Whether true or not, you like to imagine it. Whiskered diplomats padding through marble villas, curling on foreign hearths, teaching patience and mischief to new keepers. Cats outlasting gods, yet carrying pieces of them still. The routines are smaller now, but you keep them. You sweep, you feed, you patch scrapes, you stroke heads. You hum to yourself in empty halls, filling silence with a tune only cats seem to appreciate. It isn't grand, but it feels right. Faith, you've realized, isn't about crowds or noise. It's about showing up, even when no one's watching but a row of cats blinking slowly in approval. And perhaps this is the true legacy of the keepers. Not power, not wealth, but devotion woven into everyday gestures. A bowl filled, a wound cleaned, a kitten lifted gently from a dangerous ledge. Small acts, repeated endlessly, until they shape something greater than monuments. You can already imagine future generations living with cats in their homes, not temples, stroking them absent-mindedly after long days, laughing at their antics, grieving when they pass. They won't call it worship, but you'll recognize it anyway. Echoes of Bastet in every purr, every slow blink. The temple may fall silent. The goddess may fade from marble walls. But her whiskered companions will remain, and with them, so will you. And now, as the night deepens, the last oil lamp flickers low, and the cats settle into their favorite nooks, you take a long, steady breath. The sand is endless, the river eternal, and the soft press of a cat against your side is enough to carry you through. With the story drawing to its close, you let your breath slow. The weight of centuries softens, the stone walls blur, and the cats curl closer, as though they know it's time to rest. You've walked through temples heavy with incense and laughter, through markets bustling with fish and voices, through rituals both solemn and absurd. You've fed, healed, carried, and counted. You've watched devotion rise, and you've watched it fade. And through it all, the cats remained. Notice how their rhythm seeps into yours. The long stretch before settling, the sigh before sleep, the steady hum of a purr that seems to vibrate through the quiet night. Let that sound be your guide now. Inhale slowly, as if drawing in the warm scent of sunlit fur. Exhale gently, as though releasing all the day's weight into the cool sand. Imagine yourself lying there in the courtyard, stars overhead, cats pressed close like living pillows. The world is vast, but in this moment it feels small, safe, complete. The temple may be fading, but the comfort of their presence is timeless. So you rest. You surrender to the stillness, letting the last echoes of chants dissolve into silence. You feel the warmth of companionship lingering, soft paws kneading your arm even as your eyes drift shut. Whatever tomorrow brings, tonight is enough. You are safe, you are held, you are blessed by the simplest of comforts, the quiet devotion of a purring friend. Sweet dreams.